Hi, I'm Rob Greenlee, 2017 Podcast Hall of Famer and chairperson of the Hall of Fame. I'm also the founder of Spoken Life Media and the Adore Creator Network. With over 2 decades of experience shaping podcasting and digital media, I've led teams at Microsoft, Spreaker, Libsyn, and built the Guinness Book World Records largest glass of orange juice, as well as building the very first website for the Florida citrus industry at floridajuice.com. I bring a deep insight into podcasting trends, AI content, audience growth strategies, and authentic storytelling that connects. I also currently co-host the New Media Show and also host live podcast tips and spoken live show. So if you want real talk about the future of media, I'm your guest. Thank you.
You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to the Ashley Burgess Show, previously known as Live Your True Life Perspectives. And on today's podcast, I want to discuss and really deep dive into how we allow our brain to talk us out of what actually happened, what was said in a situation, and what events that transpired and took place. Because I find it very interesting how we can talk ourselves out of something or into something, and sometimes what really took place is completely different than what we remember or how we process it. We can actually create narratives in our head to change what took place, to better fit our lifestyle, our narrative, what we want in our life. We change and augment things because we tell ourselves one thing, or we need to live this life, or we need to be in this situation, or we need to be in this relationship, or we believe that we should be in this career no matter what, whatever that is. And this happens in real situations as well, like current events, where we will change it. Like something really did happen, and then you're like, well, there's no way that actually took place. There's no way. And so we make up an entire narrative to make it easier on ourselves, to not get scared of things, to feel as though we have a really good beat on things. And so on today's show, I really want to discuss that, and more so even, not just how we do it in current events, right, and things that happen, and you're like, oh my gosh, did that really happen? And we color it, and we change it, and we make it out to be something different. But I want to talk about it in relationships and how we do that in our relationships today. Many of you are doing this in your marriage, in your current relationship, even maybe at your job, your career, or in your family dynamic, maybe even with your parents or what have you, and you're changing and augmenting things from what's really taking place. And we need to be able to see and recognize this as happening. Why it's important to recognize it is that, well, when we change what really happened, we kind of find ourselves in a pattern, right? Because many of us change things because we don't really want to see the truth. We'd rather avoid the truth or avoid the situation in hopes that things will get better on their own. And I think that some of us are in these patterns of action because maybe we've been down this road multiple times, maybe with somebody different or maybe the same person, and we just don't want to deal with that. We don't want to have to argue it. We don't want to have to, shine light on it, what have you. And those are things that we really need to look at in today's podcast. So in a relationship, we tend to rewrite history, making either somebody the angel or somebody the devil. And some of you are not, black and white thinkers. So I'm not saying many of us, see obviously shades of, let's say, gray. But I do find that interesting when I work with clients. Most of my clients are the avatar that is coming from the position of, hey, I just got in this new relationship with this person, and they're telling me that their ex is a narcissistic abuser. What do you think about that? And, sometimes that could be the case, but it depends on how we see the concept of narcissistic abuser, right? I mean, the way that you probably see it is the way I see it, where it's somebody that's, a bully and all self-centered and mentally and emotionally putting somebody down and gaslighting them and manipulating them and hurting their feelings, where that could be their definition, or their definition could be very different. And so they can color their exes as devils and horrible people and abusers and what have you. And then you have some people out there too, where they lose a spouse, or a relationship falls apart. And even though the relationship was, smattered with lots of problems and difficulties and issues, and maybe that person had some issues of their own, maybe lots of issues of their own, the other person still, colors them as this angel, this amazing person that got away, this amazing angel, this, they could do no wrong. They put them on that pedestal, and they think every day about they lost out on this amazing, perfect relationship. And I find that the narratives that we create keep us in patterns of thought. They also keep us in patterns of manipulation and control. Right? So if you are in these types of patterns, there's somebody probably on the other end who is controlling you, controlling the narrative, and you're allowing them to as well. And so, when we have tendencies of being people pleasers, of trying to help people out, of trying to do the right thing, and many of us come from, the people pleasing kind of standpoint as far as when you were being raised, there were issues and problem dynamics in your family dynamic, right? So, if you had this perfect childhood and mom and dad were amazing and everybody was like, very supportive and helpful and committed to being there at the highest level, I don't think you'd be tuned into this podcast, and, your life would probably be amazing, right? On all levels, because you would have been given the fuel to be able to come from a space of not limitation or feeling bad about yourself or trying to be better or trying to get attention from others, because you would already have it, right? It wouldn't be something, and you wouldn't have to be in that codependent stance, because they would be giving you what you need and vice versa. You wouldn't have to be helping them to get the attention you need from them, in order to facilitate this type of codependent relationship, right? Where I do these things for you and therefore you care about me. But if I don't do these things and you don't, and you're incapable of taking care of yourself as well, talking about the parent dynamic, right? And so when we come from that dynamic, taking care of mom and dad, or mom or dad, and we find ourselves giving and giving and giving, and not even knowing exactly if we necessarily want to give all the time, or if this is really coming from an altruistic place, or is this just coming from the fact that now my entire concept of my value has become based on the fact that I do things for other people. And that's how I was raised as a child, coming out of the situation with the parent dynamic. And I think many of you fit this avatar. And so when you find yourself in different relationships, you begin to try to tackle the big issues with these people and try to help them. But at the same time, they're doing things that might be very negative, possibly very unhealthy, or maybe even manipulating you. And we'll go into that. And, instead of really looking at it honestly, maybe we discard that because of the fear of being alone or the fear of abandonment. Or we keep wanting to, help that person out because we feel if we can help them, then that adds to our value. So even though they might be fighting us and shooting a hole in the boat, we're still trying to patch the boat every night as much as we can, because our value is about getting that boat to safety with everybody concerned. We're not really thinking about our own mental, emotional, and absolute spiritual safety that we need to have. So we color the events of things that happen with our feelings and emotions, right? The needs that we have. So something might be really bad, and maybe we're in a relationship that's very toxic, but yet, we wake up every morning, telling ourselves, oh, well, I live in this great house, or, hey, things are going to get better, or, things have gotten, things have been good in the past. And so we sleep on things, right? We sleep on things. And in the process of sleeping on things, many of us revert back to the beginning of the relationship, how great the beginning was, and the connection and the conversations that were had in the beginning. And so we use that as a point where this was there in the beginning. This was happening. This was actually real. This really took place. Now we don't want to acknowledge the fact that, yes, there was a pedestal phase and some people might have been love bombing us, or it was the newness of the relationship, or people weren't being extremely honest and there was still a mask on, that sort of thing. We don't want to see any of that. We just know, hey, back, 7 months ago, or 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, this was actually working. And so I'm going to wake up and pretend to some degree that this never happened. And some of you are so good at it, you actually forget the events of each night, because I think there's a lot of PTSD going on because there's these negative patterns. You're trying to change things, things won't change. And so if I just sweep it under the rug, I don't really think about it, maybe things will be better today. And I find that one of the most helpful things that you can do, and I personally do it as well, with regards to specific relationships in my life, is I keep a tally, a notebook of situations, circumstances, and events that take place. And I keep that because I like to keep, and it's not like a record, so to speak, but I like to keep a mental record for myself. So there's certain things that I don't forget. I don't try to colorize. I don't try to change or augment, because there's patterns in many people's actions, and there's patterns and things that people do that if we actually begin to see it clearly, if we begin to see it clearly, we can have power. And now I want to give one caveat, because I know that some of you might be thinking, well, maybe if I sweep it under the rug, eventually things will get better. And, there's a possibility for anything. But also, the longer we sweep it under the rug, something that's constantly happening, the longer we're in this toxic, unhealthy relationship, the more time we're wasting in our own life, the more time of our life that we're putting on the back burner. And think about it. It's like, okay, do you want to keep wasting the time in the situation? And I don't mean to say wasting, because tough lessons are not necessarily a waste of time, but do we always want to go through the tough lessons constantly? And do we want to elongate these tough lessons out for years upon years upon years? And I know some of you out there are saying, well, I'm already in 5 years of this, and I understand too, it's the time. I put all this time and I put all this effort in, and I get that. I understand that. But sometimes we have to step back from that narrative as well and really ask ourselves, like, what do we really want? What would really be important? And it's not about making us happy. We can only make ourselves happy. Like when I hear people say, oh, he makes me so happy, or she makes me so happy, it makes me want to vomit. And the reason for that is not because I'm like rude and crude. It's just because if somebody makes you happy, they can also make you really sad. If they can make you sad, for example, if they leave and you're distraught, right? That's not going to be healthy for you. Not to say that we don't want to have emotions in our relationship, but you don't want to give somebody like your entire happiness. Like, oh, because they're in my life, I'm happy. But when they leave, okay, so then what happens? We have to actually make ourselves happy. And happy is such a weird kind of strange blanket word that really doesn't have that much meaning. We have to make ourselves content. I think content, at peace, as far as, you don't have this racing brain. You're not freaked out all the time. You're not stressed out. When somebody's in or out of your life, it doesn't make you go from one extreme to another. Instead, you can be very level. And that's what's very important, because we have to create the stability in our own life. And then that stability needs to be like an anchor. That stability needs to be like the foundation of your home, which is your body, where you can control that. You don't want someone else in control of that foundation, where they can demo that at any moment, or they can add pain to that, or they could pull up the rugs from up underneath you. And some people might get some joy from that as well. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that manipulate and control because of their own psychosis and issues, right? Because, an unhappy person, an unhealthy person, is coming from that fact of a hurt person, right? So a hurt person is going to hurt people, okay? And when you get involved with a hurt person, they will hurt you. I know that you might think that you're the special one, the chosen one, the special friend, the special relationship, the best person in their life. And that's also part of our, our codependency and our desire to make things work. But again, I'm just saying, I would love to assume that you're above it. But again, their track record shows different, that nobody's above the hurt quotient. They're going to hurt you until they take you down notches to make you feel bad, to get you where they feel like they're above you, right? Because that's the type of person that you're dealing with when you're dealing with hurt people. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying, you know what you get into when you are with a hurt person that has not gotten help, is not seeking therapy, is not in coaching, is not working on themselves, has not they consider themselves having nothing wrong with them. Okay. When you're with that type of a hurt person, you're with somebody that has absolutely nothing to lose. And a lot of times in my own practice and my work, a lot of times what I see is that hurts a lot of my clients, and we have to regain ourselves. We have to rebuild our identity throughout the process and figure out who we are in order to get over that relationship, because they've done a number on us, and we have to overcome that abuse that we have been through. And some of it is not just for a year, it's years at a time, and we have to rebuild ourselves. So I like to keep the tally of events just so I remember things as they happen instead of what they're told to me later on, because a lot of times people will change the way that things happen, or they'll rewrite history. Okay. We see that a lot of times with regards to everything, the rewriting of history. And so in a relationship, that happens too, right? So if you can do it on a big level, you can do it on a relationship level as well. So one of the really interesting examples of rewriting history that we do, even as children, and I want to talk about this, is many of you were born into a family dynamic where mom and dad honestly were just not good parents, okay? Some of them were very, very poor parents, as far as very neglectful. And I just really bad parenting. They weren't there for you. They didn't take care of you. You had to fend for yourself. There were times where, things, maybe the electricity wasn't on, and it wasn't because they didn't have the money. They just didn't care. They didn't get you the food you needed, or they didn't take care of you, or they were too busy, going out to the clubs or drinking or doing drugs or whatever that was going on. Okay. And they didn't take care of you. And so as a little kid, we don't have the ability to process the fact that, hey, mom and dad are really neglectful. They're really bad parents, and I really got born into a bad parent dynamic. I need to fend for myself, but I recognize the fact that these people shouldn't have had kids. No, we don't think about that when we're kids. We don't think about that, right? We don't sit there and analyze and judge. Hey, mom seems to be very self-centered and probably very narcissistic. Dad seems to have sociopathic tendencies and doesn't listen to a word I say. I haven't heard that out of any 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old, right? Okay. But what we do is we rewrite the concept. We rewrite history. Instead, we turn it around on us and say, we're a bad kid. I must be a bad child. Something's wrong with me, because otherwise mom or dad would be here for me. I must be a horrible child, okay? I must be horrible, and I need to prove my value to my parents. I must be able to prove my value because obviously I haven't stepped up to the plate. And that is the narrative that many of you have sold yourself in order to not hate your parents, okay? Like not be down on your parents, you sell yourself this bill of goods in order to continue to survive in the family dynamic. That's what you do, right? We do this all the time in our adult life. We do this all the time with the news and history and our relationships. We do this all the time, right? Because it's easier to put the pain on us. Okay, this has to be my fault, my problem, my issue, because that way I feel like I'm kind of in control, right? I put it on me because that's the only power I have, is to make changes within my life. And then many of you do what I like to say is like the all-star move, as far as you become everything. You try to be the top in your class. You try to be the best sports. If you're a boy, you try to be the best kid in sports, or you try to be the best in band, or you try to, as a girl, you try to be this or that or whatever it is. And you're trying to prove your value all the time in school, in sports, and trying to prove to your parents what you do, doing things around the house, that sort of thing. And sometimes you get kudos and what have you, and sometimes you don't. And you keep just trying to get their attention. And the more you do, the more you think you're going to get their attention, the harder you work. And in this process of working harder, you're not working because these are the things you want to do. You're doing this because you want to impress them. You're trying to get their attention, okay? And you've already changed the narrative where you're the problem, you're the issue, you're the problem child. It's not their problem. So remember, you keep doing more and more and more, thinking that again you're the problem. And this happens in our adult relationships. When you're in a relationship with someone who's manipulating you or lying to you, and you might actually know it, you can feel it, you can watch it, you know that they're lying to you. You know that they're manipulating you. You know that they're playing a game on you. You know what they're trying to do. And some of you don't want to deal with it. I mean, some of you just can't deal with it. It's so painful to know that this person is doing this on purpose that you keep denying that this is happening. Okay. Or you keep changing the narrative to give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, they had a bad childhood, and or I think they were, physically abused, which I'm not discrediting. I'm just saying we give all these outs. Oh, this happened to them, this happened to them, this happened to them, right? So that's why they act that way. But if I keep giving them more attention and being there for them, they'll see my value. Now, we don't actually consciously think that. We just say, if I just give more, if I'm just there for them more, if I'm just the listening ear more, if I just hold them up more, if I just, give them this and do this more, they'll be better. And I find that interesting because that happens with a lot of people that fall into this trap. Is that you're telling yourself, you're giving them an out for their actions, their manipulation, their lying, their gaslighting. So you're giving them an out, and then you're putting all the cargo on your back to carry all this luggage and baggage because, it's got to be you. It's all going to fall on you. You have to take care of it, because that's what you've always done. And so there's part of it where the narrative is interesting because you've given them an out. The other part of it is that you're kind of also it's almost like you're seeing them as like this child or this like wounded little kid. And so they're allowed to get away with it, with whatever. You're also kind of taking the power away from them in a way because this is their own karma. This is their own direction. They can do whatever they want. We can't change anybody. If they want to go crazy and do what they do, that's what they do. You can try to calm them down. You can try to reason with them. But in the end, they are another human. They have rights to do what they want to, just like anybody else, not to hurt anybody, but they have rights to do what they want to do. And so you trying to help them, they end up seeing that as control. Okay, so then they create their narrative because they are so out of control, right? They create their narrative that they're fine and that you're just a controlling, manipulating person. And then that's a lot of times where, the names will fly out, the narcissist names and everything, because they're fighting you, And the more they fight you and the more that they put things on you, the more defensive you become. The more defensive you become, right? The less that you keep bringing up their issues, the stuff that they have to deal with, the easier it is for them to continue to do what they do. If you're not calling it out and they're getting away with it, remember this, it's like a kid having a tantrum, right? If you keep enabling them, which is what you're doing, you're enabling them. If you keep enabling them, why do they have to change? They only have to change if you don't accept it anymore. And it was interesting. I was talking to a client the other day, and I would say that I've heard this probably 1,000 times, and I hate to say that, but with the parent dynamic, it's like, they were trying to impress mom or dad. And, in these situations, usually there's, multiple kids involved, and usually my client was not the favorite, but there was a favorite. And, trying to go against that is very challenging. Trying to prove your value is very challenging. And I think that in those situations where there is a favorite, the non-favorite never really wins. It's not, there's no winning in this. This is a parent that it has a deficiency that is probably closer to one of the siblings more because that sibling, kisses their ass or does what they want to do. And I find that interesting because when you can't win over that mother or father dynamic in the relationships that you have after that, you're constantly still trying to win them over. And what I mean by winning them over is, you're trying to get their acceptance and approval. That's what it is. So if you find yourself in these toxic dynamics and you continue to hang out and spend time with a raging narcissist, right? that's going through this process, and not just narcissism. We don't need to just say narcissism. Anytime that somebody is manipulative, controlling, lying, somebody that has psychosis to the degree that they are manipulating, controlling you, lying to you, someone that's not coming from a place of honesty and authentic, self, that's a problem. So we don't have to label it as narcissism. We just realize that this is not the same vibration. This is not the same level of relationship that you probably need in your life. This isn't aiding and abetting in you. It's only just taking away from you. And so we have to really look at this relationship and how if somebody is manipulating or lying to us, we have to kind of see that and begin to write that down. And I like to keep a tally of it. And whether they're gaslighting or lying to convince you of something, or you choosing to lie to yourself or to overlook things, okay? Because this is a two-way street. It takes two to tango, right? Even if somebody's lying and gaslighting me and manipulating me, I can choose to see that for what it is and say, hey, I'm not going to accept this anymore. And eventually, if you're not going to change your behavior, I'm kind of outie. But it takes two to tango for the other person to, be nice the next day and sugarcoat it over and then do it all over again. And then you act like it doesn't exist. Or you can call it out and keep certain with that and be honest with yourself and ask, is this a little bit of a trickle down effect, which I believe it is, from childhood? Because I don't think this person would have that much of a hold on you if this isn't just a perfect puzzle piece for how you were raised. And so, when we're dealing with somebody that's compulsively lying or gaslighting us or manipulating us to feel or act a certain way, we really just have to be honest with ourselves. Because if this is really happening, which for most of you, it is really happening, okay? And stop trying to tell yourself that it's not. And I think sometimes when you just write it down and you put the dates and times and you write things down and you start seeing it for yourself. Okay, this is how we do this is logic. We have these different, pieces of evidence and information. We have these these kind of like data points here. And then we kind of look at all these data points and we realize you can't overlook all these data points. But see, the brain wants us to, because the brain is used to this pattern of behavior. We do these things for other people, even though we might not want to. We do these things to try to get value, to probably prove our value, to try to get acceptance and approval. It doesn't work. We keep doing it, and we keep going to the wrong people to get it. Remember this, we keep going to the wrong people to get the acceptance and approval over and over and over again. You have to break that cycle. So the longer you stay in a manipulative situation, you might say, oh, it's the money, or it's this, or it's that, or we have a property together, or we have this, or we have a dog together, or we have a child together. You can still raise that child and co-parent. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's already tough living with them, right? But you could do it. But there's some point where you say, what is right for me, and what do I deserve in my life? Is this what I deserve? And you have to ask yourself that question too, because some people like pain or have accepted pain as a choice in their relationship. And so really uncovering these things are very important, because remember, the brain likes to change the narrative to keep you in the loop. The longer you're in the loop, you don't change. The universe doesn't have to change for you, right? So then nothing has to be done. It's status quo. Things go on as usual. And so that's why I want you to really start taking initiative in your relationships to really recognize what is truly happening, what people are honestly doing around you, what they're constantly doing around you, watching their patterns, their choices of actions, their lies, their deceits. I want you to take a tally of that, writing this down, dating it, timing it in a journal, keeping it very private so that you can start looking and seeing what's happening here. Because all these data points are going to make your mind go, okay, do I want to keep going in? Do I want to keep lying to myself, or am I ready to accept the reality here? And to accept the reality that I've been in this relationship. It's not because of my doing. It's not because I'm a bad person. I'm a good person that got trained into this process at an early age. I was trained in this process. So I have to give myself some grace. And I want you to really think about that, giving yourself some grace. I hope that this podcast has helped you. Please share it with anybody that needs to hear this message. Please. I'm trying to get the word out. Don't do any advertising. I just want to get the word out so that people can learn and grow as much as they possibly can, so that they can be happy, so that they can be, positive and grow in their life in the right way, and to end these patterns once and for all. By ending these patterns, our lives change in such an amazing way. And so please share this. If you haven't already, check out my website, ashleyburgess.com. ashleyburgess.com. You can set up a session right there online, 30, 60, or 90-minute sessions. Also, don't forget the YouTube channel. At least twice a week, we put up new video content. You go to YouTube, put in Life Coach Ashley Burgess. You'll find the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We almost hit 200,000 subscribers. And again, remember, it was not your fault. But we do have to turn the ship around. And guess what? You're the captain of the ship. Don't miss next week's show, the Ashley Burgess Show. I'll be back this time. You know it. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.